Okay, good evening, Kumi. So we've had some heavy rain and some disruptions with the connection. So I thought I'd start the lecture without you, and but record it and post it on the website because we're kind of missing our quality time, and it gets hard to catch up. It's impossible to catch up, really. So I hope patterns are starting to emerge for you. You're starting to see perhaps how this permaculture thing might work. I'm going to invite you to think about now your journey, your own personal journey into permaculture. How can you incorporate these ideas? How can you develop your experience? And yeah, start to think about the yields that you might want to get out of, applying these ideas. So today we're looking at principles 9 and 10. Slow and steady wins the race. Small and slow solutions. So how do we make big changes with small steps? So if we make a mistake, we don't trip up. We try things out at a small scale, and we find, we don't want to make things bigger than they need to be. But good things, if something works for you in a small scale, you can also replicate it. So I kind of believe that this is how we can create change on a very big, a vast scale, change in the world, by acting actually very locally and very deliberately and on a small scale. But if everybody starts to use the same ideas, the same methodology, we all start working in harmony with nature, in harmony with each other, in a regenerative way. And we start to change the world, we start to have a collective impact. And I think that's what I'm also really hoping to come from this course, is you're all in one area, or mainly. So the collective impact of having, 32 people complete the course in one place is fantastic. So question also, how are you going to work together? What's your permaculture community going to look like? Can you identify even individuals that you'd like to work with? We'll see as we go forward. So we talked about in patterns, we talked about the spiral as this thing about incremental growth, small steps. It's functional, it works at every scale. As a snail grows, so does the shell. Okay, and principle 10 is about diversity, about not relying too much on one thing. If we only grow one crop and that crop fails, then we have nothing. We have a diversity of crops. Not only do we have a chance then to have more diverse and stable incomes, we get a chance to learn and to build more complex systems that reflect nature. So in our design phase of the course, which is really our first part of our design, is designing our own personal journey forward. Okay, so as a permaculture design student, the first thing you're really going to think about is, how do I develop myself as a person, in terms of my own interests in permaculture. So I hope that's a good start. Let's just get out of this a second, and I want to switch to oh yeah, this is the same one. This model we looked at yesterday, I believe, and I want to come back to it. We're inviting you onto a design process, and this page here, this statement here is saying, once we can agree on core values, then we're halfway there towards achieving our goal. Really, it's this starting point that brings people together in agreement. This is what's so powerful. Okay, so this is how we build consensus. This is how we get to form strong and lasting agreements with people around us is we agree on the core values about how we intend to proceed. And we keep sort of educating ourselves about that and thinking about that. And collectively, as a group, once we now agree on earth care, people care, fair share, using permaculture principles, working with nature, we can then identify the long-term goals, you know, the things that take a few years to get to. And I've already talked the way through this, haven't I? But we break that down into the steps, the stages that you need to get there, and identify the resources that you need to get you there. Okay, so I'm going to switch presentations, and maybe let's go straight to this one. Actually, let's just do this. Greetings to you, Thea. This diagram, and we'll spend a little bit of time to look at this, because this is what I wanted something us to all to think about. This represents our way forward, how we're going to grow and develop as a permaculture student, a trainer, maybe teacher, practitioner, project developer, farmer, gardener, entrepreneur, philosopher, teacher. There's many roles, there's many aspects to permaculture, because it's about applying these same ideas to different parts of life, of our lives. And in some ways it has a journey of sequences, like everything in life. So let's start in the middle, let's start in the heart and saying, okay, we are inviting the permaculture ethics and design principles into our way of being, into our way of thinking and practicing. What does that mean even? How do we begin with that? Well, I think very strongly it begins with ourselves. It's about taking that onto ourselves and using that to develop the first sort of part of the permaculture journey, which is about one's own health, spiritual well-being, looking after yourself, growing some of your own herbs, thinking more holistic medicine, eating well, relaxing well, all of those things that begin to think about investing in yourself. Remember that change starts from you and it flows out from that. So that process involves investing in yourself and your own health and positive well-being. And again, it's not selfish, but that's just the meet your own needs. These are the things that come first, right? That we have to be able to take care of ourselves to a degree before we can really help other people. So the next thing, oops, sorry, I've got the cat on the table. I noticed, I only just realized that I can draw on this. So I'm going to try drawing on this just for a bit of fun. Okay, so we're here, we're starting our journey. And we're starting our journey here at the beginning, maybe, because it's the first time we're consciously applying these ideas to ourselves. Well, as we move forward along this timeline, we understand is, as I said, everybody needs to eat. We all need food. We all need to sustain ourselves. So where's that coming from? Where's that energy? Are we, how are we making a living? How are we feeding ourselves? Is that through earning money and having jobs, or starting a business, or farming? But some way, somehow, we've got to find a way to, create a livelihood for ourselves. Having a livelihood, that relates to working with other people. How do we work with other people? So there's a lot of ideas within permaculture about cooperatives, about traditional ways of that maybe groups make decisions and make plans, and how we start enterprises, and also how we access and own land. How do we go about organizing that? How do we go about organizing ourselves so that we can access land? And once we have land, that brings us into the next sort of area of learning, and area of interest is can we take care of that land in a way in which its ecological value is growing, in which we're building soils, we're supporting wildlife and biodiversity, whilst fulfilling these other objectives. Land often involves buildings. Can we do buildings in using natural materials? Can we do buildings that are heat and cool naturally? Can we find appropriate local materials and skills? As we interact more with different things, we then learn about tools and technology. In permaculture, we're interested in hand tools, in appropriate technology, in sort of we're more into bicycles than we're into cars, fuel from organic waste, things like biochar. These are all tools and technologies that we can now bring into our mindset and start to apply. And in the process, we are learning. And we can share that learning with those people around us. Even if we're novices in permaculture, there's so much to share as you as you experience it for the first time. And I hope you'll return home with an enthusiasm, to share what you've been learning, experiencing on the course. So look, we've made our first circuit now around the permaculture flower, and we're back where we started, except for we started here. It was going to be easy. We started here, and we started to think about economics and money and incomes and how we sustain ourselves. We're starting to understand better how we can form relationships with other people, form societies and clubs and cooperatives. We're beginning to understand that when we're working with people, we know how to take stewardship of the land and do that responsibly and effectively. We might begin to have an insight about how we can bring permaculture ideas into buildings, and all of the tools and technologies and other wonderful ideas within it that allow us to communicate and educate. So here's a sort of ongoing system that now builds on itself. And each time we do a circuit, we get more adept at doing it. So that's an introduction to, and again, thinking still within the ethical, within the idea of this incremental growth of the small and slow solutions, step by step. We can't figure all of this out in one go. We can't understand everything in one go. So this is your beginning of your permaculture journey, your sort of pathway into this world. And when we welcome you on board, and it's exciting to think how where this can take us if we can work effectively together. So the next part of I want to bring in some ideas here about permaculture and people. And we've talked a lot and thought a lot about tools and technologies and ideas about how nature works and what makes compost and soil and stuff. Trapping water in landscapes, using plants like vetiver, fast-growing trees like lucina. There's many areas of interest within permaculture. But the key to it, the absolute key to it, is to be able to achieve all of these things, we need to be able to come together as groups, make decisions and act on them. So this consensus model and this idea of incremental learning I think is absolutely central to how we build and how we progress in permaculture. Because we're not trying to create top-down institutions with big leaders, big bosses who tell everybody what to do. That's not empowering, it's not inclusive. For projects, for gardens, anything that we're working with, enterprises within permaculture, for them to be themselves long-term sustainable, they have to be inclusive, they have to be democratic, and they have to involve the people actively in these processes. Otherwise it becomes not sustainable. It becomes too reliant on certain people, and over time that creates a stiffness which prevents you from observing and interacting, from evolving. Permaculture runs on feedback. Feedback allows things to grow and develop. As you learn more, so you do more. Okay, so let's have a few thoughts on the permaculture design aspect of working with people, and we'll see how we go with this. Some people say there's too many people in the world, that the problem is that there's just too many of us. And in some respects, that's true, because a certain proportion of people on the planet live in a way which is truly unsustainable, truly profligate and wasteful and polluting and damaging. And what's more is those minorities, countries are pushing a development model onto the rest of the world, the majority world, countries like Uganda, to follow in those same footsteps, because they can sell you the technology and the patented information and the seeds and the fertilizers and everything that they've developed. So there has to be another path, because that truly isn't sustainable and it's not climate resilient. And if we live those kinds of lives, then yes, there are too many people. But so what we've put in the Small and Slow Solutions book, on page 9, is this graph, which is sort of points out really quite clearly that it's the top just 10% of people on the planet that produce 50% of all the pollution, and 90% of the people only 10%. So the lesson is, we all have to learn to live like the 90%, like essentially you do already in Uganda. So, but the question is, how do we increase people's life quality? How do we increase people's incomes? How do we increase people's access to healthcare, education, clean water, all those 17 SDGs? How do we do that without burning more oil and using more fossil fuels and so forth? And of course, the answer is permaculture. The answer is moving away from that kind of technology, seeing it, really a lot of it was from the 19th century. And, we've had petrol cars for over 120 years now, and it's about time we move to something, better, or better ways of thinking. And permaculture is that. Permaculture is that flip from actually people being the problem to people being the solution. It's all about how you behave. It's not the number of people that's critical. It's how many are, how we behave. So if we are all having a net benefit to the planet, we plant 10 times more trees than we pick, we build more soil than we use up, we contribute more to community than we take, then you can't have enough people. Who says that we have, based on what? So it depends how we are. I honestly believe the problem is the solution. I say I don't ask you to believe, but it's the only way to be that makes sense, is to be a net creator, if you like. And that's what we're inviting again. This is what this permaculture journey is about. Thinking about the long-term goals, Earth Care, People Care, Fair Share. How can I bring those into my life? How can I take care of myself whilst effectively taking care of the people around me, my community of people? It excites me when I come to Uganda to see a vibrant population with so many young individuals in it. Because in the UK, in Europe, it's the opposite, is we're getting old. The average age in Britain is 47. I think in Japan it's 51. They now have a huge proportion of their population is older than 60. And that has all sorts of, impacts. Whereas in Uganda, the average age is 15. It's a totally different dynamic. You're in a totally different place. Uganda as a country is looking forward to the future. Young people who are just still being educated and still open their eyes to this 21st century world, not the 19th century world of Europe and the colonies and and coal burning and all of that. The 21st century world, which has to be about ecology, which has to be about local resources, and has to be about how we use technology and knowledge to create something that's harmonious, that meets the needs of everybody, so that we can all, you know, move forward together. So here's some thinking about permaculture on a graph. So let's just bear with me on this to understand. This is measuring relative inputs and outputs against time. So in other words, today you built a compost heap. The work you did to build that compost heap was an input of your time, your energy. You know, the posho that you ate this morning is the energy that you burnt to make that compost heap. So all of that was your input. Okay, so that's represented by the red line. In permaculture, you have to invest in the process at the beginning. You have to do some work to start it off. So that's partly of what you experience today. So do you get a benefit from the compost heap today? Well, no. So the yield, the bit that comes back to you doesn't start at the same time. If this is time going this way, oh, let's get my my nice pen out. Quite complicated, is it? How come I can't see it? Draw there. It's okay. Okay, so look, so first we have to put energy in, and but over time that amount of energy goes down. We don't get anything back. There's no return here until, you know, I don't know how many days or weeks, what the time scale is. It doesn't matter. But the point is, it takes some time before we start getting some return. But when it does come, when the compost is ready, you know, or the fruit trees that we planted, those jackfruit seeds we sprouted, as they grow, so the output comes. And as the output rises, the amount of work that we have to do looking after the jackfruit tree or turning the compost, it goes down. So there's a very interesting point about here. Sorry, I'm playing with this now. When the two lines cross, is when we move into, is when we can say the systems become mature. So as our jackfruit trees develop, we get more and more fruits, and the amount of work we have to do is less. But one of the key things to think about is you've got to put some investment in up front. So this is what we're asking of you. That's why you've got now 3 weeks after this course to develop what your plan is going to be step by step. What am I going to do to work towards my permaculture paradise? Okay, and then understand, if you do it right, the yields come back and you get your payback, and it grows and grows and grows. And I'm excited to think about with several people in with so many of you in the same area, the possibility of what you can achieve by working together. So I'm going to invite you to see things differently. I hope we will have already opened your eyes to possibilities. Okay, I like this cartoon. You might not get it. I don't know. We have a thing. It took me a while. So I don't know. It's a cartoon out of a paper with little characters of street dogs, and the dogs are on the one side of the road, and they say, "Hey, Woofy, how do we get to the other side of the street?" They're asking, "How do you cross the road?" And the dog's having to think about it. They have another little thing. He said, "But you are on the other side of the street." Boom, boom. You're there already. It's perspective. To this dog, they are on the other side of the street. So there's so many things about Africa that you take for granted, as in African people, and we in Europe say are really jealous of, you know, that you have lots of land and access to all this space and possibilities and so forth. Whereas no doubt many people in Africa look at Europe and they think, oh, we all got nice houses and cars, and wouldn't it be nice to live like that, and kind of prepared to let go of the land perhaps to have a more material life, where so many of us would let go of the material life to be back up to on the land. But just think about perspectives. Okay, that's all really. And trying to see things differently. I also like this picture. I like this map of Africa, written by, I can't tell you the name of the person who put this together. But one question is, why do we always put the north at the top when we look at maps of the world? Why is the north always at the top? Because in space, there is no up and down. It's just relative. And often the way we look at maps that way is because it puts Britain or it puts Europe at the top and makes it look more important, when maybe it isn't. Maybe Africa's more important, or maybe we're all equally important. I believe, I have my own personal view, is that for the world to solve its problems, much of that momentum needs to come from Africa, because Africa's been so badly damaged by international interests that somehow that's the most important thing to get right. My view, anyway. I find this interesting to look at is it imagines Africa, had it not been colonized, what would the countries be? What would the nations be? What would it look like? Because the lines it was divided on are pretty arbitrary, to be honest. We see much of Uganda is the same. Actually, that's very interesting. I don't know. Anyway, let's not get too drawn into it. Just interesting. All I'm saying is interesting, and a chance to have a different perspective. Okay. So, yeah, I think Africa's the center of the world. Obviously, it's where humans come from, and for us to survive and flourish, then this is the place where it has to be right, and many of the positive energies can come from. And I really hope and believe that to be true. And that's one of my motivations to be working with you guys. This is a bit of an ugly drawing, so I apologize about this. There's only 6 things on it that matter, and that's these titles, so ignore everything else. But this is my idea for how we might develop a permaculture academy, or how we might approach working together and approach working in our communities. How do we create training centers? How do we create economic, enterprises in one form or another that allow us to work together and using this sort of permaculture idea of flow and of steps and so forth. So I invite you to explore this. And yeah, don't let all of the people, it begins with people. Of course it does. It begins with you. And me, of course, but self. It begins with the self, with oneself. The most important thing in the world, after all, is you, and looking after you and being the best version of you that you can be is your number one responsibility in the world. How can you continue to be you in a way in which you can also help other people? So within permaculture, I think there's a very beginning part is about people. Think about how we work together in groups and developing our skills in groups, working to consensus to build an understanding whereby we all agree with each other. We have ways to resolve conflicts, because there'll always be differences, there'll always be tensions, but can't be just too disruptive when that happens. We need to be able to move past those things. And the way to do that is to focus on the issue, not the emotion around the issue. But along another sort of, importantly, we can all help each other by working together, and we can help resolve challenges as and when they come. I'm a very big fan of cooperatives and of cooperation, and there's a lot of learning within the cooperative movement about, again, really fits within permaculture thinking, really fits in the permaculture way of things. So I think that, if you like, our school of permaculture, our learning of permaculture, our processes, maybe what you might take home with you is to think about starting from the self and the people around you. But wherever people are together, it isn't long before somebody's hungry. you know, until we want some food. Okay, yeah, until we want food. And food is something fantastic because it brings us together. And if from our study of people and groups and how we can cooperate better, how better than to cooperate through processing food, preparing, you know, the fires, make you know, getting involved in the clay cooking stove, growing the firewood, processing it, but also thinking about eating really well for our health, for our personal well-being, for our spiritual and, you know, physical development. Let's explore herbs, medicinal teas, fermented foods, so many ways in which we can help ourselves and create landscapes around us that give us food. And the more we really engage with food, you know, local, produced, and seasonal, and diverse forms of food sort of processing, then the more that actually attaches us, you know, connects us to the land, to where the food comes from, to not just the land, the soil, the worms, the compost, the understanding of ecology, of how the soil holds water, how the soil cleans water. I want people to feel directly linked, and to feel a tangible link through in their development, to understand through people how we're connected to food, how food connects us to land, and then how our understanding of how we produce food and the processes around it connects us more to energy. So we've got this step-by-step learning, and then within permaculture and energy, we need to think about buildings, because buildings represent a lot of money, a lot of materials. Things like cement are expensive. They involve, you know, burning a lot of carbon, a lot of energy to make them. Can we work with natural materials? Can we understand the thermal properties of things like with our cooking stove? How do we produce energy through biomass, through solar? You know, there's so many different ways in which we can apply our permaculture knowledge, you know, to energy. And can we do that in a way in which we can do things which obviously also going to be good for the land? All of these flows go both ways, but I kind of imagine that the learning journey that people go on is sort of to come around like this. And then, you know, we talked about growing, about energy, about production, and somehow money's got to come into it, about the value of what we produce, and the relationships that creates through trade, through local economies. Can we create other forms of currency? Can we create local savings and lending, you know, like credit unions? Can we empower each other to afford to buy the tools that we need, to share surpluses, to strategically invest surpluses in a way in which we build stronger community? And as we then sort of do our circuit through the permaculture design sort of learning process, let's then think about communication. How do we talk about these things? How do we articulate our vision? Okay, I want to create a sustainable, lovely, diverse food forest. Can I draw a picture of it? How do I design that? Can I communicate that in a way in which other people are going to help me? Other people might give me resources or money or their time, or other plants. There's so many different ways in which we might be able to cooperate. And I think communications, how we pass on those ideas, is essential, and that's essential learning part of permaculture. And the third part and the final part of this course is about creating a design, working with other people to create a design that communicates an ambition, a design idea, to whether it's small, medium, or longer term, more ambitious. But that's going to be the, if you like, the next stage of your learning. So we're trying to bring you into a process, bring you through that in a way in which yeah, it takes you somewhere. So working in groups, working with people. Schools is an obvious one. There's lots of ready, willing helpers. If we can engage with groups like schools in a way in which there's a very clear learning objective, so the school can understand what the kids are getting out of it, then schools often have land, buildings, we can catch water, we can make compost, and then we can start to build productive systems. So, you know, just really some thoughts there to send us to think about how we can move forward. Yeah, and how I'm really looking forward to seeing how you can bring these ideas into your world. And I'm just going to pause. I think I'm going to stop, and but because I've recorded this, I'll be posting it, and we'll be able to you'll be able to access it later. Okay, thank you very much for listening.